Ladies and gentlemen, viewers from around the world, welcome back to Covestro Live. I am Niko Palosuo, live from our studio in Pittsburgh, PA, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for today's discussion. And today's topic, I think, holds immense promise for the future of transportation and our planet. We are here to explore how to reinvent sustainable mobility. It's a big word, I know. But we know we live in a world where innovation and sustainability are becoming more and more intertwined, more than ever. And studies show that Zoomers, so Gen Z, born between the mid-90s and the early 2010s, they are about to witness a transportation transformation unlike anything before. Also, they are inheriting a world where the urgency to combat climate change and preserve our resources have reached unprecedented levels. So the impact of their choices, and of course our choices and actions as well, is not only pivotal but also unparalleled. But these necessities also provide great opportunities. I mean, just imagine a future where mobility isn't only about getting from point A to point B, but rather a holistic concept where circular economy principles are at the core. The role of a car may very well be quite different going forward. Today, we'll explore concepts that may revolutionize, again, a big word, how we think about longevity in transportation. A very cool subject, I think. Which brings me into today's panelists. And let me put them up on screen. First up, we have Professor Dr. Günther Schuh from the RWTH Aachen University, Chair of Production Engineering there, and a true innovator, live from sunny Aachen. I think you have a bit of rain, but mostly sunny. Welcome, Günther.
Thank you very much. It is not sunny here in Aachen. It's raining.
Well, luckily, in a virtual broadcast, it doesn't matter. And we have the honor to welcome another visionary, Sucheta Govil, Covestro's Chief Commercial Officer, driving many of the circular economy innovations that turn dreams into reality. Live from maybe rainy or sunny London, welcome, Sue.
Thanks, Nico. Thanks, Günther. Really pleased to be here.
So great to have you guys online. Before we start the dialogue, let me remind you, the dear audience, that you can and should be a part of this conversation. Type in your comments, observations, or protests in the chat on your platform, LinkedIn or YouTube, and we will be able to see and react to them in real time. We also have a Slido poll up, so you can have your say. Let me show it right away. Let's go to the poll. So if you go to slido.com and type hashtag future mobility, you can have your say, and the first poll is up already. And I see we have audience engagement already, which is great. Please keep it coming. We're asking you, what are the key challenges and opportunities for achieving sustainable mobility? So what does it take to make it sustainable? Here we go. Keep them coming, and we'll be able to look at them as we continue our dialogue. Now, let's first talk about what is transforming the landscape of mobility. We all know electrification is surely at the heart. No matter where the electricity is coming from, it can be hydrogen via fuel cells or renewables via batteries. And if you look at statistics, and why wouldn't we believe in statistics, they tell us electric vehicles amounted to some 14% of global passenger car sales in 22, with growth accelerating in many countries. So let's start by looking at the scene. And Günther, let's start with you. What do you believe, Günther, is driving this growth in electric mobility?
Well, thank you very much, Nico, for the question. I think at least we are now really pushing that new transmission system into most areas of passenger vehicles. We were, as customers, most of us were very skeptical that this is really convenient, that it works, that ranges are sufficient, and so forth. So and first of all, Tesla made us really convinced that this is for most passenger car users a most appropriate solution. In the beginning, it seemed that EV cars were significantly more expensive than combustion cars. So a lot of people said, well, I wait. And they were not convinced. Again, Tesla did a great job, and now there are quite all important OEMs on that road and providing very exciting cars. And people, well, they are out. They leave their fear. They are appreciating that, and so I think we are really in a growth path. Perhaps not towards 100%, but I think we will see 30, 40, 50% of the portion of EV cars quite soon and all over the world. Perhaps in southern part of the world a bit less than we see it in the northern part. I can tell you that in Germany and in Europe, it is really accelerating. So I'm very convinced that will be the powertrain and the car dominant design of the near future already.
Yeah, and definitely if you look at the amount of car models being turned out by these car companies, not maybe on a daily basis, but on a monthly basis, you see somebody coming out with a model that seems to be confirming this. Sue, you talk a lot with EV companies around the world. What are you seeing that is driving this growth?
Well, I think Günther's talked about a lot of it, Niko. But let me pull back a little bit. We do see the increasing market demand. That is undoubtedly a trend. There's a huge demand for vehicles, not only towards electrification, because that's kind of one word, but just becoming more sustainable, maybe smarter, maybe more individualistic while still being collective around units and family units. And I think the underlying bit, which when I meet customers, is the fact that transportation still causes, Niko, more than 20% of greenhouse gas emissions. We can't walk away from that. And that's a large number. And of course, the industry has a push towards it saying, hey, cut the transportation related carbon emissions. And that's going to be vital against this whole fight against climate change. And what's incredibly encouraging, and all the EV customers say this, is that EV sales, and Günther pointed to that, have more than doubled. The total fleet of electric cars is approximately 16.5 million, and that's tripling the stock from 2018. But it's also interesting. It's not just about the car; it's about the infrastructure. And what's encouraging also that in many countries, the number of publicly available charging points has also tripled, say maybe to about 1.8 million. I personally think not yet sufficient. It needs to be more, but nonetheless, it's an encouraging factor. And if we are to really see this, and that's a conversation I keep having day in and day out, not just with the EV customers, but also governments, lobbyists, if we are to see this momentum increasing, we have to firstly just say that in addition to people demanding sustainability, convenience, we can't walk away from convenience. So access to charging infrastructure, access to convenience in workplaces, private chargers in our own residences needs to be rolled out far more rapidly. And then we can't walk away from the fact that a bit like food, a bit like slow fashion, a bit like electronics, customers are now beginning to say, what are these cars made of? And I'm really happy to report that the previous villain of the piece, and now I personally feel the savior of the piece, that is renewable plastics, already plays such a major role. And plastics nonetheless play such a major role in fulfilling lightweighting, reducing emissions, Of course, increased functionality, a seamless design, which is really attractive, but also easy to drive and use, the aerodynamics. This plays a hugely important part. And our OEMs are basically so interested in not just the movement, but also, they need to make the cars. They need to make future mobility happen. So they're really interested in the materials, the plastics that helps them really get to this, changed, revolutionized place. And you look at NIO, you look at Human Horizons, you look at other OEMs. They are using materials to really push the agenda. You should see what NIO has put in the European market with really attractive designs. They've opened a flagship store. Niko, maybe you need to move back from the US in the heart of Berlin on Kudamm, a bit like, say, Apple or Dior used to do. And I think that's the future, but it's about convenience, it's about sustainability, it's about questioning the materials, but it's also about a huge push in the infrastructure as well.
And I think you guys touched upon so many different aspects that are driving mobility, from consumer habits to new materials and recyclability. I think so many drivers at once are driving what we're seeing here today. And I think that's quite amazing. This is why I also believe that we are seeing a revolutionary thing happening. It's so many drivers happening at once. If we quickly look at what is happening on the audience side, we see that investments, true cost and infrastructure. You touched, Sucheta, already on the point of charging networks. So clearly, this seems to be on people's minds, depending, of course, in what part of the world they are in. It's great to see we have a global audience again, also from Africa, Kenya, so India, Malaysia. So all these countries have different starting points to kind of go forward. You mentioned innovations, and I think innovations are really at the heart of driving this development forward. Not only innovations for mobility, but also innovations for circular economy. And we just got somebody mentioning materials and chemicals. It's great to see that there is a lot of potential there to be seen. But Günther, if I continue with you, you have really pioneered the idea that car chassis can last way longer than we currently think. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this electromobility brings something on a kind of silver tray, which we were not addressing enough up to now. This is the longevity of the powertrain. I mean, the electrical powertrain has not only the advantage that it runs emission-free. It is a big distinction between a combustion powertrain and an electrical powertrain, that even the combustion, or mainly the combustion powertrain and the chassis of the car, these are the two things that limit typically lifetime of cars. And now we get that electrical powertrain. I mean, a combustion engine powertrain in passenger cars typically lasts, let's say, 250,000 miles. And whatever that needs, 15 years, 20 years. But if you look at an electrical powertrain, I mean, good engineers, not only in Germany, create electrical engines that you can't destroy. They live forever. They live 100 years. So why throwing it away and throwing the whole car away as early? And so our approach is to make these cars, the next generation of cars, far longer living. You know, a lot of people do not know that at least in Europe, and especially in Germany, passenger cars, new passenger cars, live in average only 11.3 years. And then we throw that away. I mean, even that is already, with existing technology, is ridiculous. And it's not sustainable. It's the opposite. And with our concept, we created, fitting to that lifetime of an electrical powertrain, a chassis, an aluminum profile chassis, which lasts at least 50 years. And what Sucheta said, the plastics, the achievements of Covestro and some others in plastics allow that we have a new modularities. You see that here, that we have a kind of skateboard that's a long-lasting basic infrastructure of the car. And then we have all the other attachments which you can add, and you can exchange that over a lifetime. So what we recommend and what we planned is an upgrade reassembly factory where you drive the car through every 5 years. And then that's a bit of a sketch of that factory where the car comes in. That layout is different to traditional car assembly factories because it needs more flexibility. And you disassemble a couple of units that are relevant for the customer, and you update them. You do not only maintain them, you update them to the latest state of technology, even to the latest state of design. And with that, you keep the car every 5 years upgraded on the newest level. And so why changing the whole car? And what we assume typically, we need only to exchange in value of parts of the car between 10 and 12 or 15%. So it's even worthwhile. And the important part is, cars are a bit like fashion and clothes. They must look good. As Sucheta said, with the Neo car, and you can sell not only cars because they are superior in technology, they must look good. And fashion changes. So it needs to be possible and environmentally sense-making to even exchange the design of the car, partly inside and mainly outside. And the newest developments in plastics technology allow a superior exterior with unpainted plastics, which you can disassemble and completely reuse as for the next new part, and remanufacture that. And so that's our concept, to create cars that would live, let's say, 4 times as long as typical cars live nowadays.
I think that's fascinating, what you just showed us, Günther, and reminds me of my neighbor who is still driving a 70s Ford F-150, which is 50 years old, but of course it's not as high-tech as the Neo that Sue mentioned in Berlin, or it's not up to date. So I think your idea of recycling or renewing parts of the vehicle, as we just saw in the animation, while keeping some parts intact, I think that's astounding. And I would love to come to see somebody going to the shop and getting a new car while part of the car remains the same. I think that's great. And Sue, you have been working with a lot of innovations that make this possible. I mean, Günther mentioned recyclability of plastics. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's happening in this area and what Covestro is doing to make this real.
Yeah, Niko, I mean, recycling, especially in the world of mobility, automobiles, is becoming not just super important, but also critical. It's going to be, I believe, along with the electrification and autonomous driving, one of the biggest revolutions in the field of mobility. So I repeat, recycling, autonomous driving, and electrification, the three in combination will be just taking this to the next stage. And maybe I take a few examples because, recycling is a big word. Let's take something like just the headlights. Yeah, let's not even take the whole car. Let's just take the headlights. How many people think really that even something like the individual parts, in this case, the headlights, need to be recycled so that they've been used again and again? And, at Covestro, we are working with our polycarbonate colleagues, and we are working with, in this case, mechanical recycling. It's very, very easy. if you really know the whole manufacturing and the whole value chain, we're working with these mechanical recycling for recyclable headlights made completely from polycarbonates. We work along with this with one of the leading technology companies, Hella, and you can see some of the video clips that are going on there. And that's just for one element of it. This week, Niko, and I think for those viewers and listeners who've tuned in, even though we're in the early stages here, I'm really thrilled to say that Covestro has started research into the chemical recycling of polycarbonate. And this means that we could well be revolutionizing a whole closed loop partnership along with value chains. And the underlying goal is just so important. It's about the reusing and delinking from fossil fuels. So achieving circularity, the decarbonization of the entire value chain, and is essentially making the future of mobility come through with not just speed or not just being linked to the petroleum part of and fossil fuel part of the whole chain, but really delinking it from fossil fuels. So new material cycles, for example, along with recycling technologies, we are investing in. They need to be developed. People need to come together. Alternate raw materials, bio-based raw materials. And I'm once again, one example I'd like to take is, the whole EV box. For those who had the fortune to attend some of our K fairs in Dusseldorf, but also in other parts of Europe and in the US and in China, the first wall box from a climate neutral polycarbonate. I mean, those are big words, but we've made it possible. Climate neutral polycarbonate EV box. We've produced it. So we are really thinking electrification, recycling, either mechanical or chemical, closed loop value chains, and making sure that mobility really powers us into the world of a very, very climate neutral economy, but yet keeps the convenience factor upfront for customers along with autonomous driving. So maybe I hand back to you, Niko, because I think I covered the waterfront quite a bit with this topic.
Thanks, Sue. But I think it's great that you mentioned these examples, because I think many people don't know what is already possible and what the engineers and scientists are working on. I mean, I was blown away alone by the fact that bio-based polycarbonates, that you can take used fat oils from McDonald's French fries and turn that into other raw materials, which end up again as new polycarbonates. And now you're saying that we can actually take old polycarbonate and make that chemically into new ones. I think that's just fascinating what is happening in the chemical recycling place, because this is such high science that it certainly appears very promising. And we can see that our audience is already actually addressing the same topics. I just want to read this out loud because I think this touched upon what you just, Sue, talked about. Just thanks for the question again. What novel strategies or technologies are you envisioning to address current challenges in e-mobility, battery range, charging infrastructure, environmental sustainability? I think, Sue, you touched already on some of these aspects that make the entire ecosystem of electric mobility circular and more sustainable. But maybe Günther, maybe you can also kind of comment this from your side. How are you seeing the different developments also from the materials side?
Yeah, I love that question because it also indicates that the solution or the further improvements are not just coming from one solution or one technology. It is one that we take that opportunity with the new technology and powertrains to make it long lasting and the production of cars far more environmental. But the question, I think, is mainly meant to the, let's say, at least perceptions of the disadvantages of electrical cars. And I can say all these suggested solutions from all sides, they are coming still very significant improvements. First, in the battery sector, it is on the cell side. And we just must see that the lithium-ion batteries or lithium-natrium-ion, which is also lithium-ion battery, these are big progresses, and that principal concept is an 8 or 10 discipline, let's say, winning setup. that has still a large potential of improvement in terms of energy density and so forth. At the same time, I think what we see all over the world, the infrastructure is increasing. Yes, if the question means, is it going fast enough? Well, I must say, as somebody pushing it is not fast enough. But I mean, around the world, politicians are seeing that, and it's. I think we will have even a boost phase to increase that, because that what we can't achieve in range with pure battery electrical vehicles must be solved with a convincing charging infrastructure. I should also say, I mean, I'm completely convinced that at least 70% of all passenger car users could be really satisfied with nowadays battery electrical vehicles. And we shouldn't only point on those who have longer ranges to go, are more, let's say, have a more long range demand. And for those, we should, what we do right now in Europe, we shouldn't point negatively on the hybrid cars. And we shouldn't point on saying, okay, fuel cells and hydrogen is only for industry and for trucks. No, I would say we should really increase the infrastructure of producing green hydrogen. And for all those like me, I have to go 40,000 kilometers in a year with my car. To be honest, I'm really a battery electrical, well, convinced person. But some of these rides are not really making sense with pure battery electrical car. So that's what we foreseen, and what we prepare is for heavy duty use. We should even prepare hybrid cars. We do it with a fuel cell, with a small fuel cell in the way of range extenders. So to answer that questions, even on that side with the architecture of the powertrain, there is a big potential. And what we shouldn't do, I mean, as a researcher, I should say that, and I heard the same already shown from Sucheta, we shouldn't limit our technology scopes. We should be technology open and allow the additional technologies, let's say for the last 20 or 30% of those who might not be sufficiently served or equipped with pure battery electrical vehicles.
Thanks. Thanks, Günther. And I think that is a really important point, keeping the options open and using every technology there is to make the world more sustainable, as we can all see from recent weather reports and other developments on the planet, that we cannot dismiss any technology that really works. Let's take a quick look at where we are with the Slido commentary. We actually see digitalization also coming up to the topic as a driver for sustainable mobility, also infrastructure. So thank you for those. Let me already open up the next question, because I think now we're going into many of the topics which also our audience seems to be super interested in. Let's not answer this yet, but I just want to show it what's going on. Thanks, Paul, for the question. Does anyone have insights on software-defined vehicles? Seeing many OEMs so focused on this area as well. I think it's a fascinating question. Before we go there, let's take up the next Slido question. Let me put it up there and ask you, dear audience, what features do you believe define future cars? So is it design? Is it software? Is it innovative technologies or functions? Safety, security? Something that Günther also said in his concept, that security and safety must always be upheld, even in the next generations of cars. Is it driving assistance systems, multimedia, digital features? Let's see what you have to say, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. But let's now go to the topics that I think our audience is also very interested in, which is kind of the next generation, the Generation Z and the future of transportation, because that's kind of really going back to the future. And the Generation Z are the future custodians of transportation. And if we look at them, they will have a transformative influence when they go to that Neo shop in Berlin and ask questions. This is what I want from my car. They have their own preferences for mobility. And there is a study by McKinsey. And why wouldn't we believe McKinsey? They said, based on their study, that instead of private cars, Generation Z prefers public transport, carpooling, car sharing, micromobility, bundled shared mobility, so multimodal mobility, also something that Günther, I think you touched upon. And over half, 55%, would be willing to share their private car. And now, whether you agree or disagree with these findings, Günther, let me start with you again. How do you see Gen Z will influence future mobility choices? And Sue, please go right after that, because I know both of you are in close contact with Generation Z.
I have the Generation Z at home, yes, that's true. And yes, the Generation Z will change mobility behavior significantly. And the willingness to share is very important. That's actually one reason why our cars, a lot of people think environmentally friendly cars are small cars. And I think the opposite. I mean, we should be flexible, and we should be capable to use cars for various purposes, and especially should use one ride for more than 1.2 people, which is I think, average in Europe to use passenger cars. So we have 7 and 8-seater cars, but in a shape and in a homologation, like we call it in Europe, of passenger cars. So that will be a contribution. Whenever I listen to these studies, even from McKinsey saying the next or Generation Z, they will be happy with public transportation and sharing and bicycles and micromobility, I would say yes, if you are at the right place. And if you're somewhere in the privilege of living downtown, you can have that. And in Germany, we have, let's say, 8 or 9 really big cities where this service is, if you work there, if you study there, if you live there, you don't need your own car. But if you live somewhere else in the countryside, I wouldn't say if you live in the middle of nowhere, and in the world in between these cities, there's very much nowhere. There's no chance to have any sufficient service with public transportation, and you can't do it regularly with your bicycle. So yes, it would be nice if all these percentages in the market share of mobility would significantly increase. My assumption is we should mainly concentrate additionally to that on the 50-60% who will need cars, environmentally friendly cars. And yes, the other part of the question is we should increase by all means, there are a lot of means, the utilization of that car. What we need to have an offering of more individual mobility, but with less car miles. So more passenger miles with all concepts, but less car miles. And that is sharing, that having more people in one vehicle, having concentrated that, connecting that multi-model. So that will be changes. But we should be a bit cautious with saying we shouldn't improve that, because we can serve and solve that with public transportation and micromobility.
Thanks, Günther. Sue, I mean, you have been, I have seen you acting and interacting with also Aachen students who are very much into the future of mobility. So maybe you can share some of your insights.
Yeah, and once again, thanks, Nico, for asking that. But before I go into, university students from Aachen, who frankly are such a source of inspiration for me, but before I go there, maybe I touch a little bit upon where will mobility face its, current mobility concepts, where will they face their biggest competition? Yeah. And when I look at some of the launches by technology companies, the Vision Pro from Apple, for example, which will be out next year, you saw that in the in the last launch that they had. It's going to be retailing for $3,500. And it's not just a set of glasses. It's basically, I would, in my layperson's term, and I'm so bad at explaining it, moving from saying a desktop computer to say a laptop to now say an iTop. And if the Vision Pro enables people to travel and move from one place to the other without having to travel, that's where current mobility, concepts of mobility will face its biggest competition. So I think the field of, the current players in mobility will have to think dramatically different. It's a bit like camera manufacturers had to think dramatically different when, your mobile phone could just become that feature. So I think they'll have to say, what do we do to enable people who no longer need to travel? Because that's what the Vision Pro will allow people to be in a place and experience that place, experience a Christmas with family at the other end of the world or any other festival without really being there. They'll be able to do that through their eye features, through touch features, etc., etc. But I run away with myself, Nico. And that brings me to the question you really asked, which is the students at Aachen. And I think I see three things. Firstly, the students at Aachen are questioning, and likewise in many, many other universities in the world, are questioning the very framework and the paradigm. So what I saw is that they were not saying, how can I make the current car faster? How can I make the current car more sustainable? How can I make the current car a different look, smaller, bigger? No, they were just questioning the paradigm of mobility. They were questioning how to be mobile, you could power from solar in this case, but anything else, photovoltaic cells, the materials, the seating features. So they were really not using even the current car model as a benchmark. And I believe that's the way to go. The second bit is that what I noticed is that these were young minds who really wanted to play in this field. And I think the more and more industries, current mobility companies start saying, how can I attract young people to solve for the sustainability challenge, to solve for the recycling challenge, to solve for, as Günther put it, longevity in the whole mobility concept. I think we are a real source for young people to join us and design for future mobility or immobility in this case. One doesn't always have to travel. So I think it's a combination of attracting and harnessing the dividend of young minds, but also learning from them that they never question, they never say, how can I make the status quo better? But they really are questioning the paradigm or what needs to exist or not exist. And I think that's brilliant.
Thanks, Sue. I showed some of it. Yeah, go ahead, Günther.
Nico, if I may add, because I have to say that here, it is so great that Covestro is the main sponsor now over years for that team. I mean, we, as you know, I'm as a professor at my part-time involvement developing cars, and I know what a challenge that is. But it is really impressive what every year a group of students achieves, and what power and what innovation support, especially Covestro, with not only with being sponsor and giving some money to that, but with all the professionalism which comes into that whole team. That is very impressive, and I'm in a double sense very thankful. That gives the students that feeling that they can change the world and improve the world environmentally, and that is so great. And I can say, since I'm trying to invent cars, these people, these young guys, these ladies and gentlemen, they are the best source in my new companies because they are already able to build a car. I mean, a full functioning, participating in world competition and even winning their people, which is the best qualification that you can achieve in such a young age. So at that stage, I'm as impressed, but very much thankful. Thank you very much, Sucheta and to Covestro. That what you're doing to these students and to our university is great, just great.
Thank you. I mean, frankly, it's a selfish reason because we just need to make, not be successful in a world which fails, but be successful in a world which is successful. So to that extent, I'm terribly thrilled about it. Thanks, Günther.
And thanks, guys, for commenting on this, because I think you're proving that it is Generation Z, which is not only defining the requirements for future mobility, but some of them are actually also doing them. And I think that's a fantastic combination. There we can see the students of today are actually creating the future for their part. I just want to touch upon some of the audience feedback we have got. I think touching also something you said, Sue, just earlier, the role of digitalization, help of AI to accelerate R&D product development. I think what you just mentioned about maybe not having the need to travel at all because you can digitally be present. A great example of that. Thank you for that question. If there's anything else you would like to touch upon, feel free. I see. Maybe before, as we're closing to the end of our talk, I think this is a good point by Alex. Economical and ecological parts of sustainability. What about the social part of sustainability? In the context of mobility, I would say. I think this is a good feedback from the audience. Would anybody of you would like to touch upon this?
That is really an important point, and that's why we are very much pushing in the next generation mobility to address that it's not only about environmentally and a bit cost cutting. It is so important that mobility stays affordable, because being mobile is a social benefit. It's a social issue. And so we must be careful, because parts of the auto industry is going forward in higher, more equipped and more expensive. And together with not long living and so high depreciations on that value, that all makes mobility expensive. And furthermore, especially these people who can't pay too much, they are perhaps, and we must take care of that, they might be the last to fulfill their wish to do sustainable mobility, because it's too expensive. So it is very important, and that's my chair is called production engineering. So we are basically focusing not only on enabling fascinating designs of products and cars, we are focusing on how can we do that in an affordable, in a cost-saving way. And that's, again, a push towards Covestro and towards plastics environment, next generation of that, which can substitute a lot of other things and make the overall product better and more affordable.
Thanks, Günther. Sue, you want to touch upon this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always right, absolutely correct to talk about the social factor of any industry, and definitely mobility. And I think there are 2 or 3 factors. Firstly, let's take age as a criteria. We're talking about Gen Z, and that's great. But we also have to talk about the older, people are living longer. And one of the big needs as people live longer, but they lose their driving licenses, as you know, after a certain age, is the ability to still have a vital lifestyle, to still be able to, be independent. And things like affordable autonomous driving is likely to make that happen in a fantastic way. So that's kind of the age factor. Then I look at underserved economies. I mean, one of the biggest migration reasons could well be solved if, and I'm not talking about when economies are in political strife, I'm just talking about moving up the economic ladder. I think one of the greatest migration issues could well be solved if we harness the power of affordable mobility in whatever form, either through electrification or through individualization or through AI or through individualized usage, solar usage, et cetera, to ensure that people in underserved communities are still able to harness their economic dividend. And I think that's going to be fantastic as well. And it will solve a large part of the environmental crisis, as we're also aware, because all this is linked. So I think it's an important factor. And that's where I do believe we do need to rely on open innovation. We shouldn't keep this really just close to our chest, because the more and more we make available, the better it'll be.
Thanks, Sue. What a great way, I think, to close the discussion about, when I'm 100 years old, I will be driven around in an AI autonomous driven car, and I can live a full life without, even though I've lost my license because of bad eyesight or whatever. Thanks, Sue. I think that's a great. We are now ending towards the end of our broadcast time. So I want to thank you so much, Günther, and so much you, Sue, for investing your time and energy just before the weekend, sharing your thoughts. And thank you for the audience for these thought-provoking questions and discussions. I think this is a fantastic way to get to the bottom of what really matters for future mobility and the sustainability of that. So thank you, dear audience, so much for sharing your feedback. I can very quickly show at the end that the requirements from your side are not very high. it's only driving assistance. So we have to get more people engaged in that next time. But thank you so much for joining, Günther and Sue, and take it easy, and see you in the next one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Niko.
And thanks to the audience.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.